What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Not About Wrestling. I'm your host, Chris Illuminati. This week, I'm talking to Ring of Honor star Shane Taylor. Taylor is known for his violent demeanor and survive-at-all-costs mentality. Since his 2016 debut with Ring of Honor, the 6'1", 350-pound star has positioned himself as the problem solver on the roster. He also calls himself the baddest of all time. And when someone says that, you kind of have to listen. Taylor is completely open and honest about his intentions in the sport of professional wrestling. From the start of this interview, he made it known that every time he steps in the ring, he wants to prove the haters and doubters absolutely wrong. In this episode, Shane and I discuss him escaping the streets of his hometown of Cleveland, being forced to prove his toughness at a young age, his gravitation towards professional wrestling, being a dad, and he even dishes a little dirt on his former tag team partner, WWE star Keith Lee. He tells a pretty funny story about one really long road trip with Keith's really bad playlist. Shane is a good dude. We talked for a while. We talked about a lot of different stuff. I even admitted that I dropped my phone in the toilet way too many times, or almost do. And he even, got to talk about his beloved Cleveland Browns for a little bit, who at this point are doing well, but the both of us admitted that if anything was going to stop that team this year, it's going to be a pandemic. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, entering the podcast, hailing from Cleveland, Ohio, this is Shane Taylor. There we go. You're back.
All right. How you just gonna start with such a blasé introduction as, "Hey Shane, what's going on?" Come on, man. You got to tell the listeners who I am, baby.
Well, okay. Well, this is how it works. So usually on the podcast, I do the whole intro like before we start talking, and what was happening. So I would do the big intro with the guy I was talking to. So it would do the intro twice, and it just sounded ridiculous.
Okay. So, fair enough.
Plus, I feel like all the fans should know who you are. Like, I'm just going to be saying things they already know.
Possibly, but one of the things that I learned and that really stuck with me, I got some advice from William Regal when I was doing some extra work one time, and he said, never assume anybody knows who you are. You know what I mean? And so for me, I take that into every interview, podcast, performance to go, all right, if people don't know who I am, allow me to reintroduce myself. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That's in a whole.
So do you want to do the introduction?
I do. Right, as a matter of fact, ladies and gentlemen, the CEO of Shane Taylor Promotions, the former world television champion at Ring of Honor, the baddest of all time, Shane Taylor.
That's much better than I would have done.
I mean, you know what I mean? If you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. You know
that is true. So before you and I hopped on, we were talking about iPhones, but this was going to be my first question because it almost happened before we got on the phone. How many times a day do you almost drop your phone in the toilet?
In the toilet?
Yeah.
Maybe once, but I tend to drop my phone a lot. And luckily I have the casing on it and shit, but recently, man, because I game a lot too, I've been dropping my controllers 3-4 times a day, and I'm like, shit, this is gonna break one of these times.
Do you feel like it's sometimes I feel like it's contagious? Like once you drop something, then all of a sudden you got the drops for a couple days. Like you can't hold on to anything.
Bruh, it's crazy. Now I know when you think about receivers in the NFL too, and you're like, man, he's just not having a good stretch of games. I feel like that's what it's like. Once you get that first drop, you're like, then it gets in your head. Now you're overthinking it, and it's just pain in the ass, man. Pain in the ass to go through.
I'm almost dropping my phone in the toilet. Here's one thing I am good at though, and I don't know what this is. If I'm in front of a cabinet or something and something's falling out of the cabinet, without even looking, I can put my hand out and catch it. And I don't know what that is.
Do you have kids?
I do. I have two.
That's dad instinct is what that is. I do the same shit. Like my kids are running around like bam, like stop, you know what I mean? Like right before they hit the corner or something. Like whatever that is, that's the prelude to like old man strength. You know what I mean? So that's what that is. That intuition to be able to catch and do that stuff, that's what that is.
Do you do this? Do you do this sometimes? Like I used to do that, and then after a while with my kids, I was like, you know what? They really need to smash their head, so they stop.
For the sake of anybody out there, because we live in a world of snitches, I'm not gonna say that I do that, but there's definitely some times where I go, all right, learn this lesson. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna keep telling you, learn this lesson, and then when you look at me like, oh, I'll be like, yeah, let's not do that anymore. You know what I'm saying?
How good does that I told you feel? Like I told you to stop. Like that feels so good.
Listen, I live for I told you so, right? I live for I told you so, not just as a parent, but as a performer, as a person. I'm antagonistic by nature. So the worst thing that you can do to me is say I can't do something or I won't do something or I'm not talented enough or somebody's better than me. And I go, okay, I'm gonna make you look stupid, come back to you, look you in the face and go, I told you so. Now you look up.
What's your favorite career I told you so?
Favorite career I told you so? Damn, that's good. That's a great question. I think my whole run as television champion was my favorite career I told you so because I'd been saying for months that I was a guy that the company could depend on, that I was a guy that can deliver in the clutch, and I pride myself on that. And I think that whole run was manufactured by me, and the performances that I had with everybody that they put me in the ring with showed that not only can I go out there and deliver every single night, but I can adapt to my opponents and I can take what they do best and make magic every single time. And like nobody was bringing in, you know, superstars from this country or superstars from that country to for me to go up against. These are guys that are just on the roster. You know what I mean? These are guys that I can help showcase and also prove, hey, all of these guys, if you put them in positions to succeed, can be stars here. We don't have to keep going out and bringing this guy in or that guy in or this guy in. We've got enough talent right here to compete with anybody. So for me, not only showcasing myself, but showcasing the people that I was in the ring with, and being able to elevate all of us over the stretch that I had it was my biggest I told you so.
Wouldn't you think too? I mean, I could be wrong. You can tell me I'm wrong here, but just making it in your business, isn't that an I told you so?
Yes. But for me, because so many people have sacrificed to get for me to be where I'm at, people have, you know, put it all on the line. People have died to make sure I got to where I'm supposed to be. So just making it is never good enough for me. I can understand that thought process, but for me, I do everything to be number one. Just making it or just being here, just being happy to have achieved what I've done so far just isn't good enough. You know, I constantly push. My ambition is just constantly grows, and for some people that it's a problem. Some people, you know, think, well, he's gotten this, he should be happy. No, I'm not gonna be happy until I've retired. I've done every single thing that I wanted to do, and my children are set up. You know, my grandchildren are set up. You know what I mean? That's when I'll be able to look back and feel successful.
Don't you think some people kind of would look down on it because they're looking at their own insecurities?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And I think, but there's nothing I can do about them being insecure, right? People can look at my success and be mad, but I'm never one to be upset about anybody else's success. I want everybody to eat. I want everybody to make money. I want everybody to feed their family. I would never like go behind and try to sabotage somebody else's success because that makes you less of a man, in my opinion, right? Um, so for me, that's their own shit that they got to deal with, and I'm gonna focus on my success, my guys, Khan, Moses, O'Shea, Ron Hunt. I'm gonna focus on Shane Taylor Promotions and getting everybody where we need to be, and then everybody else can worry about themselves.
Can you think of a time when you might have pulled somebody aside and been like, "Look, you're fucking up bad." Just kind of maybe it's not even in the business. Maybe at some point, you saw somebody in life going the wrong way.
Right.
Have you ever kind of had that situation?
I have. I've done that with close friends. I've done that with my brothers. I've done that, for people that are close to me, which aren't a lot of people. So more oftentimes than not, it's me on the other end of that conversation though. and especially like guys like Ray Rowe going, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, get it together. Yeah, you right. You know what I mean? But
Well,
yeah, but yeah.
Sometimes there's a difference between not being focused and your mind not being in it for a day or two. Like sometimes that just happens.
Right.
Like your mind's like,
Right.
especially in the business you're in, it's like, every day in and day out, you just kind of like, you kind of lose focus a little bit,
A little bit, yeah.
So how do you stay focused in moments like that?
What helps me, honestly, and it sounds cliche, but what helps me in those times is knowing I have a finite amount of time to be able to do this, right? This is what I've dedicated my life to. This is what my children depend on me doing, you know what I mean, to put food on the table. I can't have lapses in concentration. I just can't. You know what I mean? If that lapse in concentration cost me an opportunity that could have put, college tuition away or put this away, you know what I mean? Like that's something that I have to deal with, right? So I have to be focused. You only get a certain amount of time to be able to do this. And granted, that time period is longer for others, but knowing that, and especially the way I perform, as physical as I perform, I know that I'm gonna have to make the most of all of this. So that keeps me focused. Plus, there's a lot of guys that I'm chasing too. So I don't want them to ever say in conversation that they were better than me. So I always have to try to catch them.
Chasing just in Ring of Honor, chasing overall, like grand plans, like Oh, we have a special guest.
That's my daughter. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's going to bed. she likes to sneak in and be like, "Oh, hi," you know what I mean?
Wait, real quick. Your kids have seen you perform, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And what was the first impression? Like, what did they say? Like, why is Daddy beating up that man on TV?
Honestly, okay, my daughter, my oldest one, loves to see me lose. I don't know why, but she does. And then I think one of the first shows she came to live, it was myself against Cody Rhodes in Dallas, and I ended up beating up that Bullet Club bear, and she was hot at me for a minute about beating up that bear. Never mind the fact that the bear cost me the match. Never mind the fact that the bear started it. You know what I'm saying? It was all Teddy's fault for beating up the bear. You know what I mean? She wouldn't let me lay down for a hot minute.
That's how you get little kid heat. You just beat up a bear.
Right. Just glares the whole ride home. Just, I can't believe. You know what I mean? Like,
do you ever threaten her stuffed animals?
For stuffed animals, no. But if she's not doing what I'll threaten to take all the toys out of the room, because like I tell her, I'm like, whether she thinks it or not, none of the stuff that she thinks is hers, it's hers. It's mine, and I allow her to use it. You know what I mean? So I share with her, not the other way around. You know what I mean? You don't own anything here. I paid for all this shit, so You know,
I'm laughing because I say the same thing, and I'm like, am I a bad dad? But now that you're saying it, I'm like, no, I'm right.
no, bro. And there's so many times where I feel like the way I think, I'm like, I must be the only one in the world that thinks like this, right? And then more often than not, everybody's like, no, you're right. Like, oh, okay, thank God. Okay, I'm not crazy, right? Yeah, like, but that's how you try to stop these kids from growing up and feeling like they're entitled to everything, because it's like you didn't do anything to earn this. I give you this stuff because I love you. I give you this stuff because I want you to be happy. But make no mistake, if I feel like you're not living up to your end of the bargain, then I'll take all this shit away. And you know what I mean? And that's just how it is.
Do you think a lot of that has to do with your upbringing?
Oh, 100%. Growing up the way I did, seeing the things that I did, I wanted to make sure that that's something that none of my kids have to worry about seeing or going through. So that's why I put the pressure on myself to be successful. I want to be able to give them those things, but at the same time, I want to be able to impart the wisdom of the lessons I learned into them, so that they won't necessarily have to go through the same situations to learn those lessons, right? And they may not understand it now because she's 6 and Laura Jean is 1, but as they get older, and I keep pounding these lessons into their head, as they get older, they'll understand what I mean. Just like with my dad, there's times that I'll call my dad, things happen, and I'll be like, you know what, man, you were right. I didn't get it then, but I get it now. And that's all I want, is for them to be able to look back, when they're 25, 30, 35, and go, all right, he was right.
Now, I mean, you've been open with your past, and your dad at a time sold drugs, and you even admitted that at one point you kind of considered that life, but then something changed you around. Was it an incident? Was it just that's not the life for you? What was it?
No, I think what it was there. It was a perfect storm coming, and I think my dad had the foresight to see it, having been in the life and seeing it so many times. Um, when you grow up in a city like Cleveland, when people have reputations like my family did, people want to test you, and they know better than to test the ones who have already proven themselves, right? So what they do is they try to test the next generation. They try to see if you're going to live up to, what my dad did, what my uncles did, right? And so for a while there, me and my cousins were just like, you know what? Not only are we going to live up to it, we're going to surpass it. You know what I mean? So we were on a reckless course. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
like for sure there was going to be a problem at some point. You know what I mean? So I think my dad seeing that and knowing what he wanted for me and knowing what my potential could be, wanted me nowhere near, the repercussions of those behaviors, right? Which is, death or jail, more than likely. So he sat me down and just challenged me to try to be a better man than he was. And as much regard as I have for my dad, I took that to heart. Became the first member of my family to go to college, and I'm now able to live my dream and go all around the world doing what I love to do. And my cousin Walter, graduated Harvard Business School, and he's in Chicago now, making moves and great stuff happen. So, just 2 kids from EC, man.
You touched on something there that I think a lot of people don't understand, especially when kids grow up in the inner city and or anyone is in an area where like dealing drugs might be one of the only options. You said that you got tested as a kid. It's this vicious cycle that never stops, because at a young age you have no choice. Like, you're either going to let people fuck with you, or worse, or you can stand up for yourself. So there's really only one of 2 choices.
And that's the thing that so many people don't understand, that don't come from that life or that background. They're looking at it from their perspective, and they were able to be a kid, grow up, and have every opportunity available to them. So it's unfathomable in their mind why someone would choose that route. And in reality, like you just said, most times it's not a choice.
Mhm.
This is not just, hey, I want to be a criminal. No, this is, I don't want to die. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I have to do what I have to do to survive and feed my family or make sure that my family is safe. And sometimes that means doing whatever it is you have to do, legal or otherwise, right? Like if I posed the question to 100 people right now and said, hey, to protect your children, would you commit a crime? More than likely, if you're any sort of a parent, 100 out of 100, that answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
If someone broke in your house right now with a gun and you had to kill them to protect your children, would you? Absolutely, you would.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So right there, it's like, okay, then we've established that it's not necessarily a question of morality. It's a question of survival.
Mm-hmm.
And when people understand that, they can start to see at 6, 7, 8 years old, you're having to make grown man decisions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what I mean? And that carries you, that carries with you your whole life, because now you see the world differently. You attack things differently. You see situations differently. And taking that mindset and applying it to different avenues like wrestling or like business, you start to realize, it's not that much different. There's no difference to me personally from a guy you see selling drugs on the corner to these like big pharma CEOs. There's no difference. They're all drug dealers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? One just goes to work in a suit every day. That's it. That's the only difference. But the mind's the same, the goals are the same. And so, for me, that's the hypocrisy in our culture, is so many people like, oh, I can't, oh, this guy's bad and this guy's good. You're like, no, they're just guys doing what they got to do.
Yeah, and it's funny because now with the way the United States is cracking down on opiates, we are seeing some of those higher level drug dealers who just had pain clinics who would just write 600 prescriptions a day to people who didn't need it. And then now we have the crisis that we have, and that's just a different type of drug dealer.
100%. And it's also interesting to me now, the way we view it as a society based on the demographic, because when it was crack, everybody was a criminal and everybody was getting thrown in jail. Mm-hmm. Now you're talking about generations of people and communities destroyed with no fathers, no brothers, no uncles, no mothers, just gone. Generations lost to jail, right? Mm-hmm. Now that demographic shifts from the inner city to the suburbs, now there's understanding. Now people are getting help. Now people are getting treatment. Now it's a disease, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, now you're not a criminal. So once again, I call bullshit on the hypocrisy of how we see things in society, because it should have been viewed the same way then as it is now, and we'd be in a much different place.
I completely agree. So when you're a kid, you're obviously looking for an escape. You escape into sports. What's the first one you gravitated towards?
The first sport that I gravitated towards was wrestling, but back then I didn't know how to get into it. There wasn't schools all over the place like there is now, so I went into football. And as a young kid, I was a bigger kid, so I was too young to play with the bigger kids, but I was still bigger, so I was in this weird like middle ground. Excuse me. But then once I started playing, I enjoyed it. It was a way to get that aggression out, that anger out, and do it in a way that I didn't have to keep fighting and doing that stuff. So to be able to have that outlet was great. And then I went into amateur wrestling. Then I went into track and field and was doing, shot put and disc and all that stuff. And then once that took me all the way to college. And then once I left college, it was like, oh, okay, I discovered independent wrestling, which I didn't know existed. And I was like, oh, okay, this is another way to get here. And then I figured out how the process worked, and then got involved and got in touch with Ray Rowe and Jerry Myers, aka J Rock. Give it up one time. And the rest is history.
So that's one advantage that I feel like our kids are going to have over us. So when I was younger, I wanted to be a comedian or a comedy writer or something like that. You didn't really have a blueprint on what to follow. Like you knew how some people made it, but you couldn't do internet research. You couldn't read like 100 biographies on how people did it. You'd have to like you said, you kind of came across indie wrestling and you're like, oh, that's how I do it. So I feel like it's a lot easier now for people. So do you remember your first indie show, or what was the first like fed that you came across, or?
The first one that I came across was one in Pittsburgh where I was at the time. It was the International Wrestling Cartel, and it was the creme de la creme of the Midwest, and still is to this day. I remember Corey Graves, who was Sterling James Keenan at the time. He was in there with the likes of CM Punk and AJ Styles and all these guys. And seeing all these matches and seeing these performers, I was like, okay, like this is what I want to do, and being able to see it done at that high level was great because that's now where my bar was, right? So for me, the only way to perform was at that level and not anything below that. So I think where I came in, and especially the guys that helped train me, had me already thinking, be world class. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I started, and then there's only up from there.
Do you remember when you first got into the business, or when you first broke in? Do you remember any like ideas you were tossing around as far as like characters or gimmicks or things you kind of thought of, like maybe that sounds good?
Yeah, there was one, and everybody plays with it a million things, but there was one name, a buddy of mine
And that brings another episode of Not About Wrestling to a close. Guests of the Not About Wrestling show stay in their own damn houses. If you like the show, please share it on social or leave a review on iTunes. And remember to subscribe to Not About Wrestling on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/BroBible and find the Not About Wrestling section. Thanks again for listening or watching, and see you all next week. Well, I won't see you at all. You know what I mean.